Welcome to Liberty Cooks, where we cook plant-based whole foods to nourish yourself and your family. And I'm Jen. Today we're going to make a recipe with the most classic comfort food ingredient out there, the potato. I love potatoes mashed and steamed and boiled in potato salad. I mean, I can go on and on. Potatoes are so yummy. Today we're going to make roasted potatoes. Since we're cooking whole food plant-based, we're not going to be using any oil while we roast potatoes. I've made other recipes where you use tahini or almond butter, maybe a little plant milk to thin it, and a bunch of spices, and made sort of a marinade out of that. But I found this recipe online that I wanted to try, which is parboiling the potatoes in veggie stock and then finishing them in the oven. For today's recipe, we're going to be using potatoes and some spices and veggie stock, and that's it. So let's get started. Okay, we'll start with the potatoes. Since we're doing an experiment with this whole recipe, I thought we would have an extra experiment trying out two different kinds of potatoes that have a very different consistency. This is a russet potato and this is a red potato. So I'll chop them up and I'll keep them separate in separate bowls. Try to keep them separate as we parboil them and then bake them, and then we'll be able to try them in the end and see which one comes out better with this recipe. So we'll start with the red potato. You want to have, I'm going to cut off the ends here. I'll put it in the composting in a minute. You want to have consistent size chunks of potatoes so that they cook evenly in the pan and when you're roasting them. When I cut potatoes, I like to figure out how big of a chunk I'm going to make and cut off one slice and then be able to lay it on the other side and then chop it up into bite-sized chunks. I'm chopping them up into, like, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch size chunk. Red potato, red bowl. All right. Then we'll cut these other slices. You know, these potatoes are kind of oddly sized. It's hard to get exact, but we'll do our best. And then that's a big stack. So I'll cut these other two stacks together. Cut, cut, keep these together. Cut on this side. Here, let's turn it. So trying to cut, like, again, 3/4 inch cubes. There we go. There. Red potato. Cut the last piece. There. I mean, they're not perfect, but you know, we're doing our best. So here's the red potato. Now the same thing with the russet. Cut off the ends. They tend to get banged up. And again, I'll cut a slice off the side. That's the thickness that I want the pieces. Cut that into chunks. And then slice up now we have a nice flat side that we're resting on. Slice the rest of it. Cut that into chunks. There we go. Have a whole bunch of chunks cut at once. And there we go. So now the next step is to parboil. There we go, russet and red potatoes. Again, parboiling the potatoes just means boiling them partially, so they won't be fully cooked by the time we're done parboiling. And the way the recipe suggests to do it is to put them in the pan, and since I have two different kinds of potatoes, I'll put them side by side. Put them in the pan and then add veggie broth. I've already turned on the pan to medium-high, by the way. And then add veggie broth to cover them. So I'm using a red potatoes go in this side. And then here's some veggie broth. I can hear them already sizzling. The pan's nice and hot. So the recipe says to use about a cup of broth per large potato. This is slightly less. There we go. We have 2 potatoes. I'll use a scant 2 cups and we'll see. Basically, we want to put these potatoes into one layer as best we can so that they all get evenly covered with the broth, so that they're all parboiling in a similar way, like they get cooked a similar amount when they parboil. And then we'll see how covered they are. I might need to add a little bit more veggie broth. And then we're going to boil off the veggie broth. And that is how much we're going to parboil them. So they're not fully submerged, but I don't want to add too much more water because we're boiling off all this veggie stock. So it's going to be really steamy in here. I think we should just, I'll add this. We'll let it go with this. There was some mental debate there. I could have probably gone on with a little bit more. You know, let's just do it a little bit more. Let's get them a little bit more covered. Okay, there. That's the great thing about cooking. Pretty much any decision, you'll be fine. It's how bad can it be? Because if I don't cook enough here, I'll just cook them longer in the oven. You know, it's not that big of a deal. So again, I didn't put any oil in the pan. All we have are potatoes and veggie stock. And again, according to the recipe, we boil them until the veggie stock evaporates out, and that should take about 10 minutes. So as they're cooking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a spoon and just sort of nudge them around and make sure that they're not, like this one's a little bit stuck to the bottom. Nudge them around and keep them loose off the bottom. You know, if we were making like a soup or something, I wouldn't worry about them as much. But since we're boiling off the liquid, they will start to stick to the pan a little bit. So we just want to keep them moving around and keep some liquid underneath them too. So now it's really kind of starting to boil. That's good. I'm going to turn it down a little bit, but I want to have the boil really happen. You can see the steam coming up already. I mean, we need all this veggie stock to go away, so we're gonna be looking at a lot of steam in the next 10 minutes. I'm going to turn it down to medium, but keep it still pretty hot. I don't want it down at a simmer because that's just going to take too long to boil off the veggie stock. So I'll leave it at medium and have kind of this rapid boil happening. We're boiling out all of the veggie stock. You want to have a low flat pan so that you can have the potatoes on one layer as much as possible. That way they cook evenly. If I had it in a soup pot that was maybe narrower and deeper, the potatoes on the bottom would cook too much and the potatoes on the top wouldn't cook enough at all. So this will make them fairly even. We finished parboiling the veggies and you can see that all the liquid is gone. So I'm going to take the red potatoes out and put them in the red bowl. Try to keep them separate. They're sticking a little, but not much. They're soft though. You can tell that that they're partially cooked. But again, they're not fully cooked at this point, just partially cooked. Just trying to keep a russet potato almost went in with the reds. Trying to keep the reds and the russets apart so that in the end we can sample them and see which one tastes better with this particular recipe. Red potatoes in the red bowl and russet potatoes in the white bowl. And I just turned on the oven to 400 degrees, so we're gonna get it nice and heated up. And then after we put in some spices, we'll put them in the oven. So I'm gonna use onion powder, garlic powder, and rosemary. I think rosemary is this really classically yummy spice that works really well with potatoes. And it's so aromatic. It almost smells sort of like pine needles or something. It's super, super yummy. And since I just have one potato in each bowl, I'll use like a scant quarter teaspoon in each bowl. With rosemary, I like to put it in my palm and crush it a little bit and sort of release more of the scent and the flavor. So we have to sort of do double spices with the red potato, rosemary. Garlic, I'll use a quarter teaspoon for garlic powder and onion powder as well. The recipe that I posted in the description doesn't give much guidance for spices, so I just happen to like them, so I just picked what I like. So pick whatever goes well with the meal that you're making. You know, if you're making something Italian flavors, there's Italian spices. And if you're making something more Mexican, here's the garlic powder. I would probably use, chili powder and cumin. But yeah, I think rosemary, garlic, and onion just work in general well. And then for salt, I'm going to use 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt in each of the bowls. I don't want to overly salt it because you can't take it off once it's on. And then pepper, because pepper and salt go with everything savory because they're so yummy. Okay, there we go, spices. Now I'm going to take I have a fork here. So I'm going to take a fork, just sort of stir them around a little bit and get the spices on the potatoes coated a little bit better. The potatoes are a little bit damp from parboiling, so the spices are definitely favoring certain potatoes over others. Same with the russets. Get them stirred up. Stir it up. All of you guys deserve some spice. All right, all right, all right. Now we'll put them on the baking mat to put in the oven. So again, because we're making, these potatoes without any oil, I have a couple of different methods to keep the potatoes from sticking to the pan when they're in the oven. The one I'm using here is this silicone mat, but you can also use parchment paper. That'll also work. So you just lay out a sheet of parchment paper. All right, so here's russet potatoes on one side and red potatoes on the other. Now when you're gonna bake or roast something, everything wants to have its own personal space so that they can cook evenly and so air can get to all the different sides. So you can have like a nice crispy crust on all sides. So I'm just taking a minute to separate everything out, using my fork to give everything a little bit of space. The pieces that stick together a bit will just end up being more steamed rather than roasted. And it's fine, it'll taste fine, but if you want the roasty crispness, you want things to be spread out. Okay, oh my gosh, we left a potato. Come on back here. It's the white bowl, so it's part of the russet family. Okay, now I'll just put this in the preheated oven, and then partway along the way, we'll open it up and stir the potatoes around a little bit, and then let it finish cooking. So this will get crispy and finish cooking in the oven at 400 degrees. There we go. Now I'm just going to take them out and give them a stir. Ooh, my glasses are all steamed up. Okay, so we have the russet potatoes on this side. So I'm just going to stir them around a little bit. Just to get them to cook evenly. Perfect. Go back into the oven for the rest of the time. Perfect. So I actually let these bake about 8 minutes longer, 10 minutes longer than the recipe called for. The recipe called for 20 minutes. I baked a lot closer to 30. Let's see how they look. Ooh, more steam in the face. Looks good. All right. Oh, it looks good. They do look browned. Here, let me put this out of the way. Turn off the oven. Oh, this looks good. They look brown and crispy, but again, we didn't use any oil. So I want to try a russet potato versus a red potato and see what they're like. All right. It's going to be kind of hot. It's going to be hot. Look at how brown that is. This one's a red potato. It's super hot. Holy mackerel. Can you see the steam coming out of my mouth? Okay. Oh, that was good. So it definitely had like a crispy, like shell. I mean, not crispy like a really dried out French fry, but there's a nice crunch to the outside part of it. And the inside was really like soft and creamy. And there's a lot of flavor from the rosemary and the garlic and the onion. That was really good. That was a red. Now we'll try the russet. I'm going to pick a small one because, man, that was hot before. So here's a russet, brown skin. Also super hot. Holy mackerel. You know, they were actually really similar. I think if I had one or the other, I would go either way. I prefer the red potatoes. They have kind of a creamier center compared to the russet potatoes, but they both stand up really well to this kind of roasting. So let's put them, we're gonna mix them all up and put them together in this bowl. This bowl is the roasted potatoes of the russet and the red potatoes. So it's about 2 potatoes, definitely enough for 2 to 3 people, 4 people if you have kids. And it's so yummy. The center of each piece is kind of creamy and the outside has got this crispness. It's so yummy and so hearty and so satisfying. In fact, my mouth was watering just thinking about this. So good. And I think, you know, the other thing about this is that, you know, when you have a plate of French fries or some like deep fried potatoes, you know, you just feel heavy and bloated and sort of nauseous afterwards. With these, you're not even you're gonna feel like nourished and warmed and not bloated and uncomfortable. These roasted potatoes are of course great with a meal fresh out of the oven, but you can also let them cool to room temperature and put them in the fridge for later. So with that, you can use them in burritos or with salsa and guacamole. That's really good. I've even put roasted potatoes in a salad just to add more depth and some heartiness to the salad. So there's so many ways to eat roasted potatoes, you really can't go wrong. They're a great basis for any meal. Super yummy recipe. So I hope you enjoy this roasted potato that was made without any oil. Thanks for watching Liberty Cooks. What? Wait, what? What did you say? I'm supposed to ask for likes or no, thumbs up and subscribe? Okay.